All right. Hello, ogres, and welcome to me editing the podcast. I know that there have been people who have wanted to know how I edit the podcast. I am by no means an audio engineer, but I've taught myself a lot over time. First things first, I want to give a shout out to Roll for Fantasy. The lady who runs the site, I guess. I don't know a whole lot about the back end of it, but her name is Emily, and she makes a bunch of kind of fantasy style music that you can use while playing your RPG or whatever, and it's free to use as long as you credit her. It's probably something along the lines of like Creative Commons with attribution. So that's what's playing in the background. If you want to check out her stuff, you can click in the links below. And I am going to start off with going into Reaper here. So Reaper is it's not free to use, or they have a free trial that you can use, but it's a really, really great non-destructive DAW. DAW, for those of you who don't know, or DAW, stands for Digital Audio Workstation. So if you're just getting into, doing editing, it is primarily used in music, but I use it for just the audio and stuff for the podcast. And like I said, I like it mostly because it's non-destructive. Audacity is great. It's free, but it's destructive. So what that means is that you can only cut it up so much before you can't backtrack anymore. And that makes it, I have a cat down here who wants up on my lap. Nope. Go on. As soon as you start doing something is when they want attention. That's how it always works. So anyway, a DAW, Digital Audio Workstation, Audacity is destructive. This is non-destructive. So that means if I pull up a clip of music or something and I edit it, I can scrub that edit back and forth to get it right where I want it, and I don't have to worry about the underlying file being messed with. So it's really nice for that. I think it runs in the neighborhood of like $40 if you want to buy a license. I don't know if the price has changed since I purchased it. It's been a while. But it's really, really awesome. So this will not look like your install if you just try it out for the first time yourself. I have heavily edited it, and that's the other thing you can do. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close this back out. There's the Roll for Fantasy if you want to check it out. I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to reopen Reaper. And you can see that right there, I even have our logo as the loading screen. So it's very customizable. And it's really awesome that way. So first thing I'm going to do is when you open up a new project, it automatically puts a track in there. Well, I'm not going to need that. I've already recorded our session, and I will show you what I use to do that here in just a second. Let's turn this monitor on. I have a bit of my second monitor going on just so you can kind of see what I can see here. You can see it pops in. I'm using Voice Meter Banana. And Voice Meter Banana is cool. Oh, it's not going to bleed over into the other one? Okay. Voice Meter Banana is cool because it kind of makes... It's a software-based mixing board, basically. And you can use different virtual cables and route your audio in different places. So, very nice. And then you can record all of that. And when you do record it, you can record it as a BWF file type. So that is a WAV file, but it has all of the different channels, like these guys right here, boop, channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, on their own tracks. And you'll see that as soon as I get this loaded up. The other features of Reaper that I kind of use here, this is my master for my plugins. So when I do audio plugins, VST plugins, I can put that on the master end and roll out with it. I have a marker list, so as I'm going through the podcast, I can throw up a marker and say, okay, this is the story that we talked about. I'm gonna put a marker here, that way when I output this list, it'll have a timestamp. And what I have found is really neat for that is once I kind of stylize and edit it and make it look better, YouTube, when I upload it to YouTube and I put that track or that time list in the description, you can actually click on those times and it'll take you right to those stories. So that's super, super nice when it comes to when I publish the podcast to YouTube. And right here we have a big clock that you have a little one here, but I like the big green just so I can reference the time. I have a better... my vision is pretty good, but I just have a better time seeing the big green numbers rather than these slightly light gray numbers down here. And this is your master volume section. So usually just leave it right on 0. Most everything in here, if you double click, it'll put it right back to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that secondary bit off and transition that back over. Kind of have an idea there. So once I start laying down some markers, I might go ahead and just kind of show you what it looks like. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a new track. No, I'm going to import a new track. I usually do this. There we go. I usually do this from the track itself, but since I wanted to record this, I was doing it differently. So right here I have my raw file that has mine and Brandon's audio on it. And let's bring it all the way back here. So you can see it's pretty long. We recorded about 2 hours and 10 minutes almost, and I will probably knock that down to like an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 15, maybe an hour 45. It depends. I don't remember how much time beforehand I had started recording. And I like to put outtakes in, so if there's funny stuff that we've said or done beforehand, I will put that at the end of the show and separate it with like little censor sound, you know, the boop, that. So as you can see, if I expand this, this track is 8 different channels. So it's over here. So you can see this top channel, and it's very hard to see the waveform on this, and that's because my Behringer Xenix QX1202 USB, and I'm using dynamic mics. So the problem with using dynamic mics is that the sensitivity tends to be pretty low. Now these are unidirectional, so that kind of helps, but I have a lot. This room isn't sound treated in any shape. So I've got my computer fans running, I've got Ginger's computer fans running, I've got outside noises and stuff. So that's why I use a dynamic mic right now. Once I move into the studio upstairs that I'm building, however long that takes, I will probably invest in some I'm completely brain farting on what they're called. Condenser mics. There we go. So now my channel records in mono, so that's why you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my channel records in mono, so it's only one here. Brandon's records in stereo. So that's why there's 2 channels here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an action, and it's called item explode multi-channel audio. So it's going to take all of these channels and it's going to put them in their own track. And that's the first thing that I do. So the track, when it's selected, turns black like that. So you want to select the track and then just explode these items. Very simple. This will take a couple minutes, especially because I have a whole lot of stuff running. So just kind of listen to the music in the background while this happens. And I'll turn off my webcam so you can't see my face. My computer's a little slow, so this always takes a little bit of time. The track that you're hearing in the background right now is called Waiting. I think that's fairly appropriate for what we're doing right now. And if you are just tuning in, or you've kind of fast forwarded it, we are exploding the different channels in here into separate tracks. That way we can actually start editing. Okay, so now we have everything broke out. So the tracks themselves are still. Close that down real quick. The tracks themselves are still in a inside of the main track. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to break those out. And you can see it's still loading the waveform. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one would be Brandon as well. I'm going to pop that up. I don't believe that there was any computer sounds that we actually needed. So I'm going to go ahead and start deleting these. Let's delete those 3 tracks. And I'm going to wait just a minute to see if I can let these other guys load in. Probably delete this one. And then one of these, if it's going to have any computer sounds, will show up here once it renders out. So you can see it's still rendering mine, rendering Brandon's. You can see how Brandon's track is so much. I'll go ahead and rename that Brandon just so you kind of know. That's Brandon's side. This is Rem's. And you can see that Brandon's records at a much louder clip than mine does. And I will show you here in a minute how I can level these out in kind of conjunction with each other. So we can see here that we've got some computer noises going on along here. And what I want to do is go ahead and break one out, and then I can delete these other 2. And then I want to just solo this, so you've got mute and you've got solo here. And I just want to solo this just to listen and see what it is that we're hearing.
We don't want to hurt you. Yeah, there's too much hair.
Okay, so this is in reference to Brandon talking about a RoboCop clip that he saw where RoboCop shoots a bunch of bad guys in the dick, in the penis, in the penile area, and I had to find it. So we stopped for a second so I could look this up, and it is just as stupid and brutal and disgusting as you can imagine. We have full frontal penile nudity, and it's weird. And if you want to subject yourself to something that will make you thoroughly uncomfortable, by all means, go find it. Since we got that, I probably won't leave that in the podcast, though. What else do we have here?
Fungible.
Okay, I was looking up a word. This is probably just a beep. Or maybe some background noise. So it doesn't look like there's anything else in here that I really want to include in the podcast, so I'll just go ahead and drop that out as well. Okay, so now we just have Rem and Brandon, and as you can see... Yeah. And
$80 is pretty pricey.
It is, and, you know...
But I'm curious to see where it goes. At my last job, when I worked at NASA...
Well, that doesn't sound promising. The question is what did I do? So apparently I turned myself off. So that's cool. Well, I can at least show you my process. Apparently while I was recording, I lost half of my audio here, so that's always fun. So when going back to when I was talking about the differences between the volumes, you hear Brandon is there's me. Nintendo 64 controller with I'm really low. You might not even be able to hear me over the music. And then Brandon comes in and he's fairly loud. So just everybody who wants to try it gets it, and then there's nobody else who's interested.
Yeah, I want one too. And you have a story. I guess you'll probably follow this up with if it was a story you were going to talk about where developers stand on the Switch.
So you can see that he's very loud comparison to me.
I won't spoil your story to leave.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my track, and then I'm going to go over to this was additional extensions that you can get. It's SWS, which you can find it at sws-extension.org, and it's just a Reaper plugin extension, and it adds all kinds of features that don't come with Reaper on the outset. It's a separate project. They're available for free. You can donate to them if you so choose. And what this is going to do is when I click it, it's going to normalize this track, because I don't like the built-in Reaper normalization. I don't see any changes to the track, and I also prefer instead of doing decibel levels of loudness increasing or decreasing, I prefer to do LUFS, which LUFS is loudness units relative to full scale. So what that means is it's gonna normalize this audio to -24 based on a LUFS scale. So that kind of puts the actual audio of my voice in between the -6 to -18 decibel range, which is really kind of where you want to be for vocals. Because that way if I get really loud, then I'll be approaching 0, but you don't ever want to hit 0. You hit 0 and you go above 0 decibels and you get what they call clipping. So clipping is a bad thing. It causes distortion. It's usually too loud for people to listen to. If we were to look at me using OBS right now, they recently updated the mixer panel where you can actually see your OBS in the background here. I'll just go ahead and bring it over a little bit so you can kind of see. But here you can see that they have, this is the mic and this is my desktop audio. And as I'm speaking, I'm just barely getting into the red, and then I have a compressor going and a limiter. So I have a hard limit at -5 dB. So I'll never go up and hit that 0, even if I were to scream as loud as possible. Now I might get some distortion if I hit that limiter, because it's going to just crush everything once it gets to that point. So move that back out of the way and normalize this, and you'll see what I mean. And this will probably take another minute or two. So my PC is very old. I've mentioned this before, but if you've never watched my channel or watched my stream, I will repeat this over and over again, I'm sure. While we're waiting, I'll go ahead and bring my face back in so you can see my beautifulness. You don't have to tell me I'm pretty, I already know. Oh, hitting the mic, sorry. Right now, until January 27th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, you can get Amnesia, the Amnesia collection, for free over at Humble Bundle. There's a link to Humble Bundle down in the description there. You can get Amnesia, The Dark Descent, and A Machine for Pigs. And I'm actually posting that to my Instagram here. So. Okay, so if I click back onto here and make this the active window, now you can see that the audio for me is much more in line with Brandon's. If I click here, I think you're right. I think it'll lose. It's very innovative, and that's one thing that Nintendo is known for, is being pretty innovative with their stuff. And you can see not following that standard norm, not making a controller. Brandon is still pretty loud as far as it goes, but you can see that with this going, it is third little penis leg. Case in point. Third little penis leg. So, but with this going, I mean, you can can't see it right now. Hold on, let me pull up my my second monitor here for you. The fresh newness. You can see here on the full track, we're actually going above 0 in a couple places, especially when Brandon chimes in, because with that combined audio, it increases. In what
way do you mean?
It increases the whole of the decibels that are going out.
And then there's nobody else who's interested in it.
Yeah, I want one too. And you have a story. I guess you'll probably follow this up with if it was a story you were going to talk about where developers stand on the Switch development.
Yeah. So because of that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually do the same thing to Brandon's audio, and it's going to bring it down a little bit. And you can see, like, up here in this area right here, you can see that my audio was brought up 17 decibels from where it was originally. So I'm going to do the same to Brandon's, and it's going to drop his down probably, I don't know, maybe 3 decibels or so. Maybe not even that much. it doesn't take a whole lot out. And we'll be able to see once this finalizes. Oh, shoot. I accidentally canceled it. Sorry about that. But once we see, we'll actually see the waveform shrink a little bit. Okay, we're coming up to the end of the normalization process. You can see, yeah, it shrunk at about almost 6 decibels here. So now it's much more in line with mine. Who wants to try it gets it, and then there's nobody else who's interested in it.
Yeah. I don't know. The Switch is selling so hardcore, though.
That's true. I mean, I want one, for sure.
Yeah, I want one too. And you have a story. I guess you'll probably follow this up with if it was a story you were going to talk about where developers stand on the Switch.
So I muted that other section because when we were listening that,
I won't spoil your story to lead into it.
When we were listening to that RoboCop thing, I turned on the volume on his end so he could hear it. And the problem is that outputs it also to my track. So it's. I messed up this episode a fair amount, and it's partially because when you're trying to do things that, like I've started the streaming stuff, and I have to fiddle with the audio settings here and there to make things work for the stream that don't necessarily work the same when I'm doing the podcast. And when you're first learning this stuff, you tend to make some mistakes like that, so. It's something that's going to happen. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and put a little bit of processing on this because I'm actually going to output this track of me. Because, as I said, these are dynamic mics that I'm using right now. And these dynamic mics have a tendency to they're very cheap mics. They're very inexpensive. They're Audio-Technica. They're like $20-$30 mics. They're unidirectional, like I said, which is really good for what I'm doing in the space that I'm doing it in. But they have a pretty high noise floor. So the noise floor, for those of you who don't know, is how much like background hiss you have coming from the mic, coming from the rest of your system. I probably have a ground loop happening, which is when electromagnetic interference bleeds in from, not being grounded properly, or is it being grounded? I don't remember exactly how it works. Like I said, I'm not an audio engineer, but you get this hiss in the background, and it's especially apparent when you blow up my audio. So I'm going to do a little bit of processing on this right now, and not going to do a whole ton. Mostly just going to put on a compressor and maybe a limiter. So I'm going to go ahead and just... These Melda production VSTs really don't like to play nice with my computer. So I have to wait for them to load their UI, and it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. It's especially worse because I'm running a bunch of other stuff at the same time. Come on. Come on, you can do it. I believe in you. You're a fancy butterfly. You're a beautiful unicorn. You're made with love and ham. Pancakes. Come on. I swear, if you circle your mouse around the screen like this, it makes everything go faster. Or it just gives me something to do. One of those two things is true. Now we're going to go ahead and wait for the program to respond. There it goes. Jiminy Christmas. All right, so we'll delete all of those, and we're going to go ahead and add a limiter as well. Let's just go to all plugins, filter them out by limiter, do a hard limiter. We're going to put that at -2 because I don't want anything going above -2. And the order that you place these is pretty important as well. So each one in the chain is what you would call it, if I remember correctly, is it goes out first. So it's first in, first out. So the compressor will hit, and then anything that doesn't get compressed will hit the limiter. So anything that hits your -2, it won't go over. So, but the compressor will help to kind of squish it a little bit to keep the distortion from happening too much when it hits that hard limiter. So there are things that you can do, like using noise gates to block that out, or you can use something like an equalizer. They have one in here called Refer. And it's a EQ and dynamics processor. And if you want to take out a particular frequency, say you have one just real high pitched squeal right up in the higher end, it's going to be, in your 10 to 20K range. You can actually bring that up and kind of just take it out. The problem that I have found, especially if I'm listening, if I turn everything up, you can really start to hear the distortion with that. So I actually like to not use that to remove the hiss in the background. I like to export this file. So we're going to render this. To call it RAM, we're going to put it in podcast 140. We're going to do a wave file. We're going to turn it up to 48,000 hertz. We're going to do mono. Wave bit depth, 24 PCM. That's all fairly standardized. I've never really changed it. I've never really fiddled with it to find out if I need to. But I'm still going to keep the wave file because it's the pure. It's not compressed in any way. So it's a non-compressed file. So that's what you. When I finally output the entire project, I'll output it as an MP3. And really, if you're wanting to like save space, if you're doing a podcast, your podcast doesn't need to be at, like, if I go down to MP3 here, your podcast doesn't need to be at 160 or 320 kilobits per second when it comes to your bit rate. You know, usually the higher the bit rate, the more like highs and lows and the more minutia that you can get out of the sound file. A lot of episodes I run, I went ahead and bumped up to 128 kilobits per second, but you can be fine at 96 kilobits per second. It makes the file size smaller. If you do have a problem with background hiss, this is a really, really good kind of a tip that I've learned. If you have a problem with background hiss and you have a problem taking it out, you can output your MP3 file at a lower bit rate and it'll introduce a certain amount of hiss in the background anyway. So what that'll do is if you cut your podcast and you leave a space of dead space when you're rendering it. So say if I cut out this bit right here. If I cut that and I cut this and I just delete this space right here and we were to listen to it, I'm not going to do it right now just because I don't really have everything quite set up for that. But if we were to listen to it, you'd hear a little bit of silence there and then, you know, where I finished talking, and there'd be a dead silence. But there's still a little bit of background hiss going on right here. So you'd hear me finish talking, you'd hear it like that, and then you'd hear nothing. It'd be completely dead silent. And then you'd hear the hiss come back, and then you'd hear me start talking again. So let's put all that back together. So when you output at a lower bit rate, you can actually get a little bit of hiss back in. You can also add some noise in the background if you have a lot of overhang like that. And you can, if you turn it up real loud and then adjust the noise, I usually use a brown noise. It's usually the best representation. And you can kind of fiddle with, you know, putting it at negative 60 decibels or negative 72 decibels and just kind of match it up with the hiss that you hear. And just use your ears, you know, just trust them. It doesn't have to be super precise, but it'll help to introduce a little bit of sound back in to make it sound more natural, to make it sound less edited. So, like I said, we're going to go ahead and render this project out, because I am going to take it into Audacity. And see, like I said, Audacity. So far, because I'm the cheap bastard that I am, so far, any sound removal that I have used that I like the most, even better than I've got Adobe Audition on here. I still don't like their sound removal as much as I like Audacity when it comes to just removing that background hiss from my entire file. So I'm going to go ahead and render this out. Make sure everything's in line first. Okay, looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and render this out. Sorry for the music interruption. There's a fair amount of processing power going on right now, so. So here's where I've messed up, and I have lost the rest of what we were talking about. And I don't know how I'm going to address that yet, because I've got a lot of the episode here. You know, it's going to be, I might just go in and just say, oh, sorry, Ogres, Rem messed up once again, and, you know, made a stupid mistake and screwed something up. So now we're going to go ahead and open up Audacity. Doing this backwards from how I usually do it. So that's not what I wanted. Audacity. Oh, that needs to be deleted. So we'll go ahead and open the file. Open with Audacity. And we'll go ahead, while we're waiting for Audacity, we'll go ahead and save this project. And we'll put it into Podcast 140. Copy the name because I'm lazy. And boop. So that's that. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and delete my track here. We'll save that. Now that it's all rendered, we're going to go in and we're going to use this track to replace it. So as I blow this up, you can see the dead space here, and you can see that hiss in the background. Now, I mean, it's really low. We're looking in the negative 51 to 48 range or so. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and zoom in on that. And you can see this is complete dead space. This is where I accidentally cut me off, and you wouldn't hear anything in that. So hold on. Had to yell at a cat. So sorry, I was just checking to see if anyone was actually watching. I don't know how quickly that updates. So we're going to go ahead and zoom in on this file here. Once Audacity catches up. Close this out as well, just so my computer isn't working as hard. So you can see as we zoom in, you can see all of this fuzz in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little smaller just because I don't want to cut out necessarily all of this stuff. I mean, if it's very subtle, it'll be all right. But mostly I just want that dead space because all of that stuff will get toned down a bit as well. So I've got this, and I'm going to go to Effect, Noise Reduction, and then I'll get the noise profile. So step 1, select a few seconds of just noise so audio knows what to filter out, and then click Get Noise Profile. Okay, so it's got that. So now I'm going to select the whole file. And I'm going to go back to effect, go back to noise reduction. And then step 2, select all of the audio you want filtered, as I just did. Choose how much noise you want filter out, and then click OK to reduce the noise. So it's going to reduce this hiss in the background by like 24 dB. So anything that it picks up that matches that frequency, it's just going to squish it down. Sensitivity of 3, smoothing bands of 3. You just kind of have to play with it. It's really based on your own stuff. If you want, you can go to the Audacity wiki, and they give a pretty good explanation of the differences between these, much better than I'd be able to give you. So this is what has worked for me. Usually between 16 and 24 is what I'll do. And you want to make sure that you're reducing it. So you can actually, if you select just that bit, you can click preview and just listen to it before and after to get an idea of how much it's going to reduce it as well, instead of selecting this whole file. But I already know kind of what works for my system, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And we will let that render out. I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break. I'm going to transfer over to the break section. Mostly because I have to use the restroom. So we'll be right back, and we'll jump back into the second bit.